Hey there, thank you for watching. If you like what you see and hear, please subscribe and hit that bell button. Warning, everything you're about to see and hear comes from newspaper articles, court transcripts, and interviews with those involved. Thank you for watching. During the investigation, police would receive many tips that they felt were not credible. Others would be ruled out after being investigated. Many of those tips would point away from Mitchell Webb. Faye Ewing would come forward and tell police that she saw Peaches at the Kroger on Tazewell Pike. She had met the girl before. She claimed that Peaches was with two African American women. Peaches smiled at her. One of the women noticed and whispered something to the girl, resulting in her putting her head down. After speaking with her husband, Faye decided to tell police about the encounter. Other tips were related to human sacrifices. Police would receive a report of dogs being found with their throats cut in South Knoxville. Some suspected that the dogs were used in some type of religious ceremony. The tip was investigated, but the incidents were not linked to Peaches' case. Police would experience some extortion attempts as well. Investigators would sift through the waste at the storage treatment plant on Neyland Drive. Nevertheless, none of these tips provided any insight into Peaches' disappearance or her whereabouts. But that was all about to change. With the World's Fair coming to Knoxville in 1982, police had little to celebrate. Their year was about to start off with a ghastly discovery. On January the 23rd of 1982, a father and son were out hunting rabbits in Blount County. They made their way across the University of Tennessee Extension Farm when they discovered something startling. They would stumble across Peaches' skull near a dump on the farm off Singleton Station Road in Rockford. A pair of Mickey Mouse shoes would be found nearby, near an overturned cattle chute. Police would move the cattle chute and discover the girl's body underneath. The body was decomposed. There was no hair or skin left on the bones. The ribbons were laying there where Avery's head should have been. They had been badly faded. Wire was wrapped around the young girl's neck. It would later be discovered that the wire had come from the UT farm. Some plastic was found nearby the body, and police theorized that the body might have been transported to the site in a bag. The area where Peaches was discovered was roughly 15 minutes from Montgomery Village and just a mile from the house where Mitchell Webb's parents lived. Lead investigator Jim Winston would say Hazel and an acquaintance often frequented the Rockford area. He would refuse to say who that acquaintance was. Despite searching Rockford several times, investigators had never searched that specific spot. Peaches would be laid to rest several days later in a donated grave at the Sherwood Gardens Cemetery. Despite the discovery of the body, the case would begin to cool. Then, a tip would come in and send the case in a whole new direction. That tip would come from one of the most unlikely places, the Morgan County Regional Correctional Facility in Wartburg, Tennessee. In July of 1984, police and the Knox News-Sentinel would receive a tip from two inmates. They would claim that another inmate had confessed to killing Avery Shorts. That would lead police to Frank Tate, who frequented Knoxville. He was the perfect suspect as a convicted sex offender serving 10 years for sexual battery of a child under 13. He had been arrested in Knoxville in 1979 for aggravated sexual battery involving a child. When Peaches disappeared, Frank Tate was on parole. More importantly, he apparently knew Peaches and her family. Some Montgomery Village residents remembered seeing him and told police that he was very friendly with children at the apartment complex. Tate had moved to Blount County around the time of Peach's disappearance. He would tell police that the move was nothing more than a coincidence. When authorities spoke with the two informants, they would change their stories. They would say that they believed Tate did the murder and they wanted something done about it. Those inmates would say that they tried to contact the Morgan County District Attorney's office, but their calls were not accepted. In the end, police would not focus too much on Frank Tate. Investigators involved were adamant that Mitchell Arville Webb was responsible for the murder of Avery Peaches Shorts. In 1988, KPD Detective Jim Winston would make his move and attempt to bring the suspected murderer to justice. KPD investigator Jim Winston would be removed from the case, but he would not give up fighting for justice for Peaches. In 1988, he suspected that juries would be more accepting of circumstantial evidence. He would request Knox County Attorney General Ed Dossett to begin reviewing the police files to determine if they had enough evidence to take the case to a grand jury. Approximately 8 months later, Dossett would make his decision. By this time, Mitchell Arville Webb was locked away at Brushy Mountain Prison for burglary, and the Attorney General would turn down the request. He would say, "In our opinion, there's not sufficient evidence to warrant prosecution. Sensationalism and speculation are not sufficient to accuse someone of a crime." Charles Coleman was heading the Major Crimes Division at the time. He would say that the Peaches case was still an ongoing investigation. "It's a case that we would like to solve, as we would any unsolved murders." Ultimately, the murder of Avery Peaches Shorts would remain unsolved. Even today, nobody knows what happened to the young girl or who was responsible. When speaking to WBR in February of 2019, Jim Winston would continue placing the blame on Mitchell Webb. He would say, "We ran down every lead we had. No other abductions, no other molestation of children. It had to be him." He would call Webb a sly con man before suggesting, "He beat the system. I guess you'd have to say on this case." Mitchell Webb, Frank Tate, nobody would be charged in the case. What really happened to Avery Peaches Shorts? The possibilities are endless, yet no one will ever know the truth. Mitchell Arville Webb was painted as the primary suspect. Did he really take his frustration out on Hazel Smith's daughter? He would never take a polygraph test, and police would say that he was the killer. Did police focus too much time and energy on Webb and allow the real culprit to escape justice? The other possible suspect was Frank Tate, the convicted sex offender. He frequented Montgomery Village, knew Peaches and her family, and was a repeat child abuser. It is not far-fetched to believe that Peaches might have fallen prey to this monster. Did Atlanta's child murderer take a trip to Knoxville and return without notice? Was Peaches murdered by someone who had knowledge of the UT Extension farm in Rockford? Did police foul up the crime by focusing on Mitchell Webb? Sadly, this case will most likely never be solved. She would be snatched by a monster, killed, and dumped like a piece of trash. Her killer would go free. It's pertinent to be aware of the dangers your children face. If you do not, they may walk out the door and disappear for good. Have you checked on your children in the past few minutes? Well, you may want to do so right now.